So there's a number of impressions that does imply that this could be a trackway. Hello and welcome to Squatchspot.com. I'm Darrin Smith, and I hope that all of you out there are staying safe and that you and your loved ones are well. We are currently out in the field in very close proximity to where I had that encounter last March with the Sasquatch. And unfortunately, coming into the area, the roads are really heavy with snow and ice. And although my vehicle is a front-wheel drive vehicle and it handles very well on snow, unfortunately, no vehicle does well on ice. So I had to abort my attempts to get up to those higher elevations, actually where I had the encounter. But I am down at a lower elevation in very close proximity to where we found those interesting footprint-shaped impressions last spring that actually got me interested in investigating this area to begin with. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be back out in the field up in this area, and I'm absolutely thrilled to report that although I was under the impression the creek fire had moved through this area and got up onto this ridgeline, I can see it is absolutely not the case, and this whole wilderness area has remained absolutely intact. And I am absolutely thrilled to report that because I do believe the Sasquatch are using this ridgeline when moving from those higher elevations in the summertime down into these lower elevations in the winter time. And I'm thrilled to see that this ridge line and my research area up in this location has remained intact. So I'm thrilled about that, and I'm up here looking for any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch have moved down into these lower elevations, and I am excited to see that we do have some snow around, which makes a perfect medium to find footprint impressions. So that's what I'll be spending the majority of the daylight hours doing, is to be looking for that physical evidence. The impressions I am referring to were the footprint-shaped impressions I discovered while investigating this area last spring. At first I dismissed these impressions primarily because of the size and the fact that they were lacking the detail needed to make a definitive identification. However, after posting that video, I had received a number of messages from you guys encouraging me not to rule them out. And returning to the ridge to continue my investigation of the area, is when I had the up close and personal encounter with the Sasquatch on March 3rd, 2020. I have done an incredible amount of field work in this area. I have received invaluable information from the nearby locals and Native Americans, and I am absolutely certain the Sasquatch do move through this area during their seasonal migrations, and I have very credible evidence to support that I have actually discovered a Sasquatch nest in the area, and I am firm in my belief that this is the perfect time of year to encounter the Sasquatch along this ridgeline. Agreed, I'm not going to win any awards for musical performances. However, there are a couple of strategies I like to use when conducting field research. One, I like to wear similar attire when entering a research area. This way, the Sasquatch who frequent the area will hopefully become accustomed to my appearance. Another research approach that is very effective is to just sit and observe an environment for long periods of time. I also like to use an audible lure to hopefully entice any Sasquatch in the area to come in and investigate. This little Mexican flute is small and compact, and the high-pitched sounds it makes are ideal as a lure. I ran across an online discussion the other day that was discussing the idea that the Sasquatch seemed to be more interested in human females as opposed to males, and I definitely support this idea, and there's a number of theories as to why this may be. The Sasquatch may have identified males as being the more aggressive of the sexes, and they may have associated us as being the hunters, so they've learned to avoid us. And what is concerning is I mentioned on my last video, a 54-year-old woman has gone missing in very close proximity to this location. In fact, this woman has had Forest Service training. I don't know if she is actually a ranger, but she was very adept in this environment. And what was concerning was that they discovered her camp had been ransacked, and they were able to rule out wild animals, and that definitely raised a red flag for me, because there's a number of reports along the California Sierra Nevadas here that Sasquatch was actually observed ransacking camps. So it's very concerning that this woman may have encountered the Sasquatch. And also on my last encounter, the video that I recently posted, I was mentioning some very unusual things that occurred during my encounter with the Sasquatch, one of which me possibly turning off the GPS unit while I was deep in the forest, which I would not have done in my right mind. And so I am definitely open to the idea that the Sasquatch does have the ability to use infrasounds to alter our perceptions or create anxiety within us. And this is very concerning because this woman was spotted twice moving through the forest, and on both occasions the eyewitnesses said that she seemed in a dazed state or in some sort of confused state, disoriented, and this was very out of character for her. And she was also moving through the forest barefoot, so definitely a very unusual situation. And between the two sightings, she was actually moving in a direction that I had anticipated the Sasquatch to be moving during the summer months to get up into those higher elevations. So I am very concerned that if the Sasquatch does have the ability to alter our behavior or our perceptions in some way, that this woman may actually be under some sort of influence, that maybe they did somehow alter her behavior. And it's very concerning that I would encounter this discussion online. It seems to be a general consensus among researchers that the Sasquatch is attracted to human females, and it's very concerning now that the 54-year-old woman is still unaccounted for. Okay, so I found some interesting impressions here on this embankment behind me. And as you can see at the top there, there's a break in the vegetation that leads down this embankment. And those locations are a perfect location to be looking for any sort of footprint impressions, because the animals are going to take the path of least resistance. And whatever is in this forest behind me, if they wanted to move through this area, they're going to come through a cleared out area like you see here on this embankment, where that vegetation at the top is cleared out a bit. So animals could move down this embankment. And I'm going to show you the impressions that I found. So I'm going to point out kind of the impression that I'm seeing here. You've got this little feature here. What's interesting is it looks like it could have been something coming down this embankment. There is some sort of evidence that there could be toes here, but what's interesting is there's a slight smearing of this track, which implies something stepped there and kind of slid a little bit. And what's interesting is I'm seeing another impression here, and another impression there, and another impression leading up the embankment. So there's a number of impressions that does imply that this could be a trackway. I got out my gear and began measuring the tracks, and although there was a slight smearing on a couple of the tracks on the embankment, the size and shape of these impressions were fairly consistent at 17 inches. I also got up on top of the embankment, and although the terrain there was compact debris pine forest floor, I did discover more impressions that were consistent in size and shape with the others I had found on the embankment. And although lacking in detail, I am fairly confident these are Sasquatch tracks. The general size and shape of these tracks remain consistent, and I was also able to see more foot-toe detail on some of the impressions. I continued my exploration of the area for several hours, and besides the impressions I found, I did not find any other physical evidence to conclude the Sasquatch were in the area. So I decided to head back to my vehicle and begin my long journey down the mountain. As I continued my journey down the mountain, I stopped periodically at locations of interest that I have been monitoring. I spent a considerable amount of time up in the mountains investigating my encounter general area up there, and I also moved down to several different elevations just to see if I could find any sort of physical evidence that the Sasquatch were moving along that ridge line. And I didn't really come up with anything definitive. Those impressions I discovered were interesting, but as I moved up to that ridgeline there. I didn't find any sort of tangible evidence, so I'm not convinced that the Sasquatch are moving down that ridgeline yet. So I swung over to the Bass Lake area, and I'm currently on Goat Mountain. Goat Mountain you have seen on numerous episodes previously. I've had a lot of activity on Goat Mountain. Goat Mountain is strategic in the sense that the Sasquatch can come down onto Goat Mountain through the backcountry, and then they cross Road 426. We have numerous reports of Sasquatch being spotted as he crosses Road 426, and then that would get him up into those homesteads. There's a lot of food sources up there for them. There's a lot of crops, there's orchards up there, a lot of chickens, so there's a lot of food up there, and I think that's why we have so many road crossings there on Road 426. It's because the Sasquatch are coming down off of Goat Mountain, crossing the road to get up into those food sources. But now there is a lot of local lore that Goat Mountain is haunted. There is a lot of strange and unusual things that occur up here, and one would be ill-advised to be spending any time up here at nighttime. But as you saw in numerous videos I've done in the past, Goat Mountain has produced a lot of interesting activity, and I actually caught some very compelling FLIR footage in this area as well. So I'm just going to take a look at the area, and I'm going to be looking at the game trails because oftentimes if a Sasquatch is in the area, a lot of those game trails will appear to be maintained where there won't be a lot of vegetation, it won't be overgrown, and there's a lot of researchers out there who believe the Sasquatch will actually groom the game trails to make it easier for them to traverse an area when, hunting prey or eluding humans. And as you saw on previous videos as well, in my encounter area where I believe I found a Sasquatch nest, there was some very thick vegetation that was surrounding that area, and the vegetation was very difficult to get through. But I did find in certain areas around that nest site that there were areas of vegetation that were actually cleared out, which kind of indicated that maybe the Sasquatch were grooming that area to make it easier for them to get in and out of the nest. So that's what I'm doing down here on Road 426 around Goat Mountain, and I'm going to get at it. So I have been at it for a considerable amount of time now, and I have not come to any conclusions that the Sasquatch are in the Goat Mountain area. In fact, quite the contrary. All the game trails that I'm familiar with in the area were completely overgrown, which kind of indicates to me that the Sasquatch are not moving through the area. Also, I mentioned on previous videos when I was working this area last year, I wasn't really getting a lot of activity in this area, and I really didn't think that the Sasquatch were venturing into the Goat Mountain area. And I was thinking it may have to do with some of the previous fires we had in the surrounding areas, maybe deterred them from moving into the environment, and also the logging project that they had going on Goat Mountain, where they were moving a lot of that dead wood from the bark beetle. I thought that maybe that's what was kind of keeping them at bay, but it is clear to me that they are not hanging out in the area. I did see some deer tracks and some coyote tracks, so there are animals in the area, but I didn't come up to any conclusions that the Sasquatch are in the area. I have been conducting Sasquatch research for a number of years now, and regardless of the unyielding academic collective or inexperienced researcher, I do believe Sasquatch has unusual abilities that absolutely defy explanation. The frequent equipment failures I have witnessed among researchers while encountering Sasquatch cannot be coincidental. I was present when an entire team of researchers experienced across-the-board electronic failure while a Sasquatch was spotted in the nearby woods. On another expedition, we encountered a similar phenomenon during a strategic night maneuver when a group of female researchers who were acting as a lure believed they were being approached by Sasquatch. And in a desperate attempt to contact the other members of the team using their two-way radios, they discovered all three of their radios were inoperable, as were their cell phones. The missing video and audio files I experienced on 3 different recording devices during my encounter last March absolutely defies explanation, and for sure cannot be a coincidence. These are only a few examples of the many unexplainable equipment malfunctions I have experienced or witnessed during Sasquatch research. I know the Sasquatch are real. I have seen them and I have experienced them on a number of occasions, and they are roaming our forests. How are these creatures able to avoid detection, though countless trained individuals are out in the woods searching for them? And how is it they seem to know to avoid the hundreds of trail cameras that are monitoring the forests? There are countless reports of people experience irrational emotional states when Sasquatch are believed to be in an area, and there are numerous reports of people actually being physically stunned or immobilized during Sasquatch encounters. And although some of these incidents can be psychologically explained, there have been a number of occurrences that absolutely defy explanation. I understand acknowledging the unexplainable is not looked upon favorably by skeptics or the unyielding. However, I have spent an incredible amount of time in the field conducting research. I have seen and experienced a lot of unusual things, and the frequency of such phenomenon during Sasquatch encounters, I believe, cannot be coincidental. The circumstances regarding the disappearance of the 54-year-old woman here in the Sierra Nevada mountains is very concerning, and if the Sasquatch are responsible for this woman's disappearance, what does it all mean, and what should be done about it? I don't know what the Sasquatch are, or what exactly they are capable of. However, I am going to continue my personal quest for answers, and regardless of how outlandish my discoveries may be, I believe it is vital as researchers, if we are going to solve this mystery, we share this information. I'm Darrin Smith, wishing you and yours a very happy holiday season, and a prosperous new year. And I'll see you here next time on Squatchspot.com.